Hi, I'm John Paul Chapple, writer of Towton Audios' new series Whisky Wars. It's an epic tale of what happens when the young heir to a Scotch whisky dynasty, which has been devastated by the effects of the prohibition laws in America, travels there to try and secure his future and that of a number of others in the same business. The National Prohibition Act, or Volstead Act as it was informally known, came into force in the United States in early 1920. It, presumably unintentionally, handed criminal gangs a massive gift of the kind they could only have dreamt of, an entire nation thirsty for alcohol, which these gangs were all too keen to supply. They made unimaginable amounts of money, creating the foundations for organised crime that exist to the present day, which was great if you were prepared to operate illegally. However, for manufacturers and suppliers of legal alcohol, it was a different story. For overseas operators, the massive US market was closed at a stroke. Exports were no longer possible, stocks piled up, sending prices crashing, recession loomed. And for Scotch whisky, a drink that takes many years to mature before being saleable, things were very bad. So the question was, how did they survive? This was the basis of the original idea of Whisky Wars. It was conceived as a feature film and then as a TV series, but there was a further impetus, and that was that both these worlds, 1920s America and Scotland, are incredibly iconic. The imagery of the American gangster movies, with the sharp-dressed gangsters in their fast cars tearing through glistening city streets, shooting each other with Thompson submachine guns, is almost as familiar as the imagery of the Western. And everyone has an image in their minds of Scotland with its glens, castles, and beardy men in kilts, and mist and lochs and stags, and whisky. This is not to suggest that either of these stereotypical depictions is historically accurate, not in any way that would stand up to minute inspection. But this is about preconceptions, and smashing those two worlds together seemed like a potentially strong way of telling a story. When it came to making this audio drama, of course, there was a further crucial element that came into play. Whilst we can hopefully evoke the subconscious visual worlds I just mentioned through the story itself, there is also the extraordinarily different way in which the two groups of people speak. Yes, it's all in English, but the way the people speak in English and in English in Scotland is very different to the way they speak in the United States. Hopefully these differences will help to highlight even more the opposing desires, motivations and actions of our characters. I think it's also worth mentioning that Whisky Wars is fiction. There are some characters in it who really existed, Frank Nitti, George Moran and so on, and they were active in the illegal liquor business in Chicago in the 1920s, but I have no idea if they ever travelled to Scotland or ever had any connection with Scottish whisky exporters. I also don't know if anyone like Ewan McCullen, our hero, ever went to the United States to try and make a deal with the purveyors of alcoholic beverages at the time, who would, of course, have been operating illegally. I'm sure nobody does. So everything you hear in this story is imagined. It's the just think what could have happened narrative set in a very particular situation at a very particular time. The stakes in the story are set high for both sides, and there's every reason to believe that they would have been as high, if not higher, in real life. But this is only a story. It didn't really happen this way. Or did it? Cheers.